So let's start with the basic understanding of e-invoicing structure. So you see, people would say that e-invoicing is something new. It's brand new and it is something that I need a lot of development and studying. But to our surprise or to your understanding, it is not something new. It has been implemented in a lot of countries, and also UAE didn't just implement it out of the blue. There was a meticulous planning and there is meticulous understanding market study involved in developing this framework. So if you see the history of how this legislations or the mandate was developed, July 2023 is when they announced it. So they did it like 2 years before, or more than 2 years before they had made the announcement, and they set the legal groundwork. They issued Federal Degree Laws 16 and 17, amending the VAT as well as the tax procedures law to make room for e-invoicing procedures in UAE. They issued the initial legislation, which is making e-invoicing legal in UAE by June 2025. It's through Cabinet Decision 100 of 2025. Then in September 25, they gave the outline and obligations. What exactly, or who are in scope? What are the obligations of each person in respect to e-invoicing? This was through ministerial decisions 243 and 244. And of course, they last month, in the end of last month, they issued the administrative fines list also through cabinet decision 106 of 25. So you see, these are the legislations or the legal pronouncements which you can take as study materials for going and seeing whether so learning more about e-learning. But my point being, it didn't come out of the blue. There was meticulous study and time involved in research and implementing this legislation. Now, what exactly is e-invoicing? Now, they have given a very definite, definition, which is e-invoicing is the digital transmission and storage of invoices through a government control system. So let's spend some time and understand the basic structure of e-invoicing. Now, you see, to understand this better and to avoid any confusions, what I want you to think of the invoicing system. Okay, so there is the only thing that has changed as a result of this is invoicing. So there is no change in accounting, no change in VAT filing or any other broader aspects of the tax and compliance, but only the aspect of sending invoices. So previously, how do we send invoices? So whenever there is any supply happen, the supplier will issue an invoice to the customer. So it was always a two-party framework. But now, through the e-invoicing mandate, what they're trying to do is they are making it a five-party mandate. So the supplier is going to issue the invoice through the supplier's accredited, ASP, so accredited service provider. They're going to issue the invoice through somebody, a technology partner, and this somebody who's the ASP is going to deliver this invoice. So the details in this invoice to the FTA as well as the customer's ASP, and through the customer's ASP is how the customer will get the data. So instead of two party, now it is five party with three parties in the middle. This is exactly how the e-invoicing framework is going on. This is just for basic understanding. Okay. But if you see, the architecture is a little bit different. So if I tell about how it will work, initially the supplier generates the invoice. So they'll generate the invoice from the ERP, just like how we are generating from Zero. And through the embedded, software or through other manual means, the ASP will get this invoice and they will validate whether all the necessary fields and codes are correctly done. So if you see in the previous invoices, there used to be some 5 to 10 things in a standard invoice. If you take there would be the buyer, the seller, the amount, the consideration, the amount of tax, etc. So it was a one-pager invoice. Now there are about 135 fields which is included in the invoices. Okay, so and not standard PEPAL architecture 135 fields. So you have to generate an invoice using these 135 fields. It would be validated by an accredited service provider that we appoint. He will transmit the invoice to the buyer's ASP. Okay. And also through his ASP, the buyer receives the invoice. And of course, the ASP of the supplier will be reporting this both. So it would not happen in stages like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once the validation is completed by the supplier's ASP, this data would be transmitted automatically in real time to FTA as well as the buyer's ASP, and through the buyer he will get it. So this is how the architecture of e-invoicing is happening. This is the basic architecture. I would also draw your attention into the diagram which is given by FTA. You see, supplier will send the invoice to its accredited service provider. Service provider will validate, confirm the IDs, confirm the data, and it would send securely to the Ministry of Finance as well as the ASP of the buyer, and through him the buyer will receive. So this is why it is called a five corner model. Corner one being the supplier, corner two being the supplier's ASP, corner three being the buyer's ASP, corner four being the buyer, and corner five being the federal tax authority or Ministry of Finance. So instead of a two-party framework where we used to send the invoice, it's now become a five-party. So this is the basic understanding or the basic architecture of the e-invoicing framework. And mind me, what is going to change? It's only the way in which we send invoices, receive invoices, or edit invoices. It's all about invoicing. Don't confuse with any other aspects of it. Now, that being said, let's understand who it applies to, who should implement, who should apply the e-invoicing framework.
Amit,
Yeah,
before we proceed, I would also like to add that when the invoice is being shared by the seller's ASP to FTA and also the buyer's ASP, at the same time, when the buyer's ASP receives the invoice, again it is being transferred to FTA, that is corner 5, and then it is being sent to corner 3. So
right.
said that when the invoice is received and sent to FTA by the supplier, the receiver, that is the buyer, also validates the invoice and confirms to FTA that the invoice has been received, just as a two-way validation.
Perfect.
So this
Perfect.
so
So
so it's so FTA receives the invoice twice, one from the seller and the same from the buyer also.
after receiving from the seller, the buyer also confirms it with corner fund. So this is the
FTA,
basic
correct.
architecture. Thank you for that addition, Murtuza. So this is the basic architecture of how e-invoicing could go on. Let's understand who has to implement, right? I mean, what does the legality of the things, how does the legality of the things go? Now, if you look at Ministerial Decision 243 of 2025, it gives a definition like this. It's applicable to any person conducting business in the UAE in respect of every business transaction. So it means it's a blanket regulation. It applies to everybody, right? Any person conducting business in the UAE in respect of any business transaction. Now, who's a person? Person is involved includes a natural person as well as the legal person. So if a natural person is conducting business, he should also implement e-invoicing system. It's not that it is only for the corporates. And what is business? Business has a standard definition. So any activity conducted regularly on an ongoing and independent basis. This is the same definition that we are using for corporate tax as well. So if you have to see whether it is one-off or he's repeatedly doing this service to understand if he's conducting a business and if it is applicable for e-invoicing. And obviously, business transaction means any transaction which is conducted in full or part. So any transaction involves in basically a business would involve purchases, sales, uh, discounts, and I mean to say credit notes in case of amendments. So all those transactions where you are exchanging an invoice before, it will all come into the ambit of invoicing, and now it includes sale of goods as well as sale of services. Okay, so it's a blanket definition which includes I mean, brings the ambit into everybody, right? Now, how it would be implemented? Now, even though it is kind of applicable to everybody, it's they have made the implementation mandatory on a phase by phase basis for certain. Now let's understand. So what happens is, first they have a pilot program. So few people will be selected by the ministry to implement this, and they have to implement the system by 1st July 2026. Okay. And in case of large taxpayers who have a revenue of more than 50 million, they have to appoint an accredited service provider by 31st of July 26 and implement the e-invoicing system, that is send or receive invoices through the e-invoicing framework by 1st January 27. So they have given a 6-month difference. You see, you have to appoint by July 26 and start by or a 5-month tenure they have given for the initial implementation. Now, phase two, those are small taxpayers who have a revenue of less than 50 million. They have to appoint an accredited service provider by 31st of March, and they have to implement it by 1st July. Now here, if you see, they only have a 3-month window. So there is a 5-month window here, and a 3 for large taxpayers, and a 3-month window for small taxpayers. And of course, for government entities, they have to appoint the ASP by 31st March 27, similar to small taxpayers, and implement the e-invoicing system by 1st October 2027. So you see, it applies to everybody. Now, in the mandatory implementation stage, they have also given that it is only for B2B transaction. It's only for business to business transaction, because that is where input tax credit happens. They have for temporarily taken out B2C transactions. So if anybody is conducting B2C transactions, they will not come under the ambit of invoicing. It is primarily to B2B transactions. Okay. So there are few exclusions also. There are some people who are completely excluded from the whole invoicing mandate, which includes government and sovereign activity. So if any government agency is doing something which is not competing with the private sector, for example, like say Ministry of Economy is issuing a license, obviously they will take a license fees. There is a business transaction. Those things where they are not competing with the private sector, they have taken them out of the ambit of invoicing. Airline passenger services, I know most of you would know there is a if you take indirect taxes on transportation, it's based on the destination or the origination. So okay, let's not go into the technicals, but it's a different ball game altogether where the supply happens. So they have taken them out of the ambit as well permanently. So international passenger transport, where an electronic ticket is issued, those will not come under e-invoicing mandate, because it's very hard to identify the supply of service. That is why. Airline freight services, however, they're temporarily not included in the scope, provided they issue an airway bill for international goods transport. And the law has specifically mentioned that after 24 months, they will also be included into the e-invoicing. Of course, financial services with a zero rated, as per our recent VAT rules, they are also kept outside the scope of e-invoicing. So you will not have any banks or anybody who's doing financial services will be out of scope. So these are the scope of So what you have to understand that it is applicable for everybody. It is going to be implemented in a phase by phase manner, depending on your turnover. Then it is currently only for B2B transactions, not for B2C transactions. And obviously, there are some exclusions, some governmental and airline passengers, which are kept outside the purview of e-invoice. So this is how the scope mandates. Now, fundamental few questions which could arise in looking at the scope is that how do you determine the revenue? So whether you come in phase one or phase two, what is the revenue? How do you determine the revenue? We know that it is 50 million, but 50 million of what? So for that, they have given a clarification that for determination, use the gross income earned in the most recent accounting period. So you have to take your accounting period. So implementation of, or you have to appoint an ASP if you're a large taxpayer by 31st of July. So which is recently concluded financially. You have to take that. So if you're following a Jan to December year, it would be December 2024 or 2025 rather. You have to see whether you are exceeding 50 million, your gross income is exceeding 50 million in 2025. And based on that, you should determine whether you come in phase one or phase two. So end of the day, it's applicable for all of you, whether it's 50 or not. But to decide the timing, you use the revenue of the most recent account. Now, I am a person who's doing B2B and B2C sales. Okay, I specifically told you it's not applicable for B2C. So if I'm doing both, should I apply? Should I implement e-invoicing? Absolutely, yes, you should have to. But the thing is that you should only issue e-invoices B2B transactions. B2C transactions are kept outside the purview. And if a person who's exclusively doing B2C, now this is a little rare. I mean, even if you're a supermarket, there might be companies or some management. If I buy a lot of stationery from them, I may take a VAT invoice. I mean, I don't know the procedural things, but it is very rare that we see somebody doing exclusive B2C. If you're doing exclusively B2C, like a tea shop or something, like you're only serving, then it is not required temporarily, but you would come into the ambit later. So the timelines and procedures for that would be provided later. So these are the legal application. I hope it is clear. Any doubts at this point? And also, Murtaza, if you want to add in few points, you will.
Yes, Amit, I would just like to add that as we said that the transactions will be applied, the invoicing system will be currently applicable to B2B as well as B2G, that is the government. So government parties are not
Yes.
exempted from this. So B2C and B2G, the application will be. Only exception is for the government which are into sovereign activities.
Exactly. Exactly. That's correct. So it's even if you're a service provider who giving to B2G services, you're providing some services to government, you're still in the ambit. Okay.
Correct.
Only exclusive B2C is deferred. Thank you. Thank you for pointing out.
Also from the latest meeting with one of the ASPs, what we have discovered is that though the B2C transactions are excluded, however, if you have got any B2B purchases, okay, even in that case, they have to implement the e-invoicing system in order to receive the invoices. So that means that overall, none of the businesses would be completely exempt from these e-invoicing system. So you will not
Perfect.
be issuing invoices to B2C. However, you will be receiving the invoices from B2B.
Totally, totally. So, for clarity, this would include not just sales, but also purchases also. So that's what the
That's
point
true.
is. So it is very rare to see a B2C transaction because they would be purchasing from on a B2B basis. So it's very difficult to get away with the application at this point of time.
Correct.
So in case if you're receiving only purchases, you only need to kind of like an appoint an ASP and do the purchase transaction. So B2B portion, your B2C portion will not be coming under the ambit right
Correct.
now. Okay. So that is the scope. So going forward, let's understand compliance. Okay, so these guys are coming under the scope of e-invoicing, but what compliances do we have to do? Obviously, the compliances for which timelines were given by one, appoint the ASP by a specific date. It's 31st of July in case of large taxpayers and 31st of March 27 in case of small taxpayers. Appoint and also implement the system. These are the basic compliances, but we will see it in a little bit of refined level. So first compliance is obviously appoint ASP by the feast deadline, right? Now, if you see, there are about 9 service providers who are given in the the Ministry of Finance's website. So there are only 9, but what we understand is there are going to be so many more who are going to be accredited. So you have to select an ASP who's there in the list. Okay, there is no way in which you can't select a person who's not there in the list. Now, even if you select a person and if you have a service level agreement with it, how would FTA know that you're selected within the deadline? For that, you have to add the ASP through the Imara Tax portal. Now, if you open and log into the Imara Tax portal, you will already see a tab for e-invoice. Okay, you have to click on it and you have to onboard the ASP. You have to first have an agreement with them separately and then onboard them through the Amara tax portal. So you are just go to e-invoicing, click on the list of ASPs for onboarding tab, click on this drop down and you see you have to select the tin. So now fundamental thing is, again, if you are reporting VAT as a group, still you have to appoint ASP for each individual tin. Okay, it's not each individual entity should appoint an ASP. It's not that every you can do one for a group. So if you have multiple registrations on the portal, you have to select the 10. Now, once you select the 10, you will find, the list of accredited service providers. You have to just select them, okay, and click proceed. So if you proceed, the FTA will ask you about, you're going to leave the Federal Tax Authority system and you're going to the ASP's portal. In the ASP's linking portal, once you send a linking request, you have to add your registered email address and TIN. Okay, mobile number is optional. If you add these, they will verify, and once the information that they auto populate is correct, you just have to click and submit. And from then you will get a response from PayPal saying that you're successfully added. And if you say take your linkage started, there would be a green which would say it's linked. Okay, so it's not just important that you get you onboard an ASP outside the Imara tax portal, but you have to link it through the portal as well to avoid these fines. So this is the first compliance, appointment of ASP, as well as linking, onboarding him through the Imara tax portal. And then once you onboard, after implementation, you obviously by the deadline, if it's a large taxpayer, by 1st of Jan, you have to start issuing e-invoices, right? So for them, what is the exchange and obligation code? So you have to then, after onboarding and after the cutoff date, after the deadline, you have to issue and transmit e-invoices in respect of all transactions. By all transactions, again, I'm saying it includes purchases, sales, and as well as credit notes. Okay, if you're having any changes. So normally, when do we issue a credit note? When the business transaction is cancelled, where the agreed consideration is reduced, or consideration is received in full or part, or an administrative numerical error, any changes, any credit note, we used to primarily issue credit notes manually. That is not possible. Even if you're issuing credit note, that has to go through the e-invoicing system. So after that, you have to exchange and report the obligations through an e-invoicing mode. Now, what is the timelines? Okay, so generally on a blanket level, e-invoices have to be issued within 14 days from the date of transaction. Now, it is the date of transfer. 14 days from what date is a little different for when you are registered with VAT already and when you're not registered with VAT. If you are registered with VAT and if there is a transaction, you have to issue the invoice within 14 days from the earliest of either the date of supply, when the goods are transferred, when the service is completed, receipt of payment, or issue of invoice. Okay, when you're not registered for VAT, but you're doing B2B purchase and sales, then you have to do it within 14 days from the earliest of date of supply or date of receipt of payment. So 14 days is there. It's not blanket. It's different for people who are registered for VAT and not registered for VAT. Now, why this difference is because this is the law which is provided in VAT law. So once you're registered, once VAT is applicable for you, then you have to go as per the VAT law. This is when VAT law is not applicable for you, so they have given a different timeline for exchanging information. So from the transaction, we have 14 days to issue the e-invoices. Okay. Also, as I was saying, the new invoice is not a simplified one pager. There are about 135 fields that we have to fill, and out of which, out of these 135, there are some mandatory, there are some conditional, and then there are optional. So typically a standard tax invoice in a PIPOL framework would involve 50 mandatory data points. So we have to see, let's take a look at what are the data points which would be included in the new invoice. So there would be invoice identification. What is the invoice number? Date. See, date, there should be in a specific format. Invoice code type. So if you're issuing a standard invoice, it's 380 and it's 381 for a credit note. So invoice currency code, payment due date. Then there is seller identification, name of the seller, his TRN, his license number, his electronic address, so that he can our ASP can link it with his ASP. The buyer's name, VAT, electronic address, buyer address, there are a lot, monetary totals, tax details. It's all very specific, and there is a lot of details which we have to give, item, unique line identifier for each item. What is the name of the item? Invoice quantity, measure code. So there are plenty of fields. It's not in the format of the standard invoice. So this is where the work is. Okay, so you have to fill all these invoices all these data fields in your invoice. Now, how exactly can we do that? We can do that by embedding this, a patch, or embedding, the ASP's software into your ERP. So this is what we have to do at the implementation stage, right? Once you raise an invoice from your ERP, it should automatically, the ASP should receive the details and it should link to corner 3 and 4 and 5. So if you can automate it, you can embed this, and this is what you have to do from the timeline. This is why the time is given for you. From the date when you appoint an ASP to the date when e-invoicing mandate is applicable, the differential time, you have to first improve your process. Have a system to collect all these details. Otherwise, the ASP will not validate the data, right? So you have to collect all these details. You have to put new fields in your ERP to collect all these details and then share it onto the ASP and go. You can either do it automatically. This is called a one platform framework. It is very good. This is what everybody is doing. But of course, you need a digital team to kind of like, go to clients and embed them into your ERP. Instead of that, they have also given an option to manually enter it. So what you do is you keep your existing ERP in Xero or anything. You manually do all these data fields, 135 numbers or 50 mandatory ones. You collect all details in a specified format. Pint is nothing but PEPAL International Invoicing format, or in XML or in JS1 formats, and you upload it into the portal of ASP within 14 days. You can do this also. You can either automatically embed this, or you can collect these details in a separate sheet and then upload it within 14 days. 14 days from whatever is the limit that we saw. So these are the two modes in which we can kind of like bring this information into FTA. So this is what we have to do. So it's not an easy process, you see, like you have to map, you have to get data from with respect to this. So that's where this initial 3 months or the 5 months would come in handy. Other compliances would be like, there is a data security compliance that you have, whatever data you collect, it should be kept in UAE itself. So there is a mandatory data residency. There are certain encryption standards which is informed, and there is a 5-year archival retention which we have to keep. Now, mostly if you select an ASP, if you have a contract, then they will ensure all this, but this is just for our information. And of course, since we are doing e-invoice, there could be system errors, right? So if there is a system failure, you have to report within FTA within 2 business days. And if you have done some incorrect, or like, if your initial invoice has some corrections, you have to inform the ASP within 5 business days. Now, these timelines are very important. If we miss it, there would be penalties. So this is what the compliances are. First, I'll just, if I see, first is appointing an ASP and linking it in the Imara tax portal. Second is like, implementing the e-invoicing system. Be very certain about what is the timeline. So 14 days from what is very important. So you have to kind of like, issue invoices. At the same time, you have to capture all these data fields and make sure of all these other compliances. So this is what the compliance part is. We will go into penalties, but we'll pause for Murtaza's comments.
Yeah, it's all good so far.
So in case if you don't do this compliance, what penalties? So the penalties are quite steep. So if you don't appoint the ASP within the time, okay, within the time mentioned, if you're a large taxpayer, 31st of July, if you're a small taxpayer, 31st of March, if you don't do that, there will be 5,000 for each month. Okay. And after appointment, at the time of implementation, if you failure to issue an invoice, within 14 days, there will be 100 per invoice or a maximum 5,000 per calendar month. Same for, so in case if you're not transmitting a credit note, then it's the same as failing to issue an invoice. So credit notes also very important that we issue through the e-invoicing framework. And if you don't notify of a system failure, I told you, you have 2 days to notify the FTA of a system failure. If you don't do that, there would be 1,000 dirhams each day. And if you, same for the buyer as well. If you have to notify system failure, and if you don't notify ASP, your credit service provider, of the data changes, I told you there are 5 days to do that. You will get 1,000 each day. So penalties are quite steep, and it's on a daily basis. So it there is no question of non-compliance. There has to be a compliance at at this level, definitely. Now, if somebody asks you, okay, I got all these details, I got, I understand the penalties, the compliance, the scope, etc. But how do I implement it? So what are the steps? So basically, first step is like, you have to conduct a business impact assessment. So if you bring in this e-invoicing process, what changes that you have to keep in? Obviously, the major change is accessing or getting a hold of those 135 data points, correct? So we have to now do those gap analysis. What data are we collecting versus what data is required for the e-invoicing system, and bridge the data, make it automatic. How you can make the collection system automatic? Obviously, you have to then go for the ASP, and you have to have a SLA, service level agreement with the ASP within the timeline, okay, which is 31st of July or 31st of March, as the case may be. Then you have to integrate the system. Obviously, after signing, you have to integrate, you have to understand, use the gap analysis, use the business impact analysis, and integrate. You can choose whether you have to go by the manual system, which is not recommended, because if you take data from one to there, and if there are manual entries which are involved, definitely it's something which is going to bound, or which is going to be of very very it's bound for some clerical errors. So either you should definitely try the automatic one instead of the manual one, but you have to integrate their system for that. Then you have to do some time for pilot testing. You have to give 2 3 FTA has an option for that. You have to do some pilot testing whether everything is right, and after the testing framework, you should go live. So it is quite simple from a technical point of view, but from the implementation point of view, there is a lot of work involved. And fundamentally, what we should be looking at for all the clients that we have is whether they have their invoices system would have the data for those 135 data points. So this is a overall roundup of e-invoicing. So Murtaza, your comments.
Now, as what we discussed with all the ASPs, so apart from the two-way, that is the automatic, which is called as an API integration, whereby the system, the ERP, will be automatically integrated with the ASP's web portal, and all the data exchange will happen on a real-time basis, and it will be done automatically. When it comes to manual, so there are two options. One is where we can store the data in a storage drive, which is being provided by the ASP, which is called as SFTP, Secured Folder Transmission Process. And the second option is to use the web portal of the ASP itself, whereby the data can be provided in an CSV or an XML or a JSON format. So these are the two options under manual also. As said that the integration, the API integration will take time, because what we have been heard by the ASPs that it will take at least 2 to 3 months to integrate the e-invoicing system in the ERP, and it has to be done on an entity to entity basis. It will not be done on an ERP to ERP basis. Apart from that, that will be a cost, that will be an expensive option. And the second one, though manually and prone to errors, however, these are the economical options which are also available, whereby the data will be transferred to the SFTP, and on batches or on a daily or a fortnightly basis, the invoices will be uploaded on the e-invoicing system. And the third option is whereby the web portal of the ASP can be used either to upload a CSV file, or also they have got their own system whereby the invoices details can be manually put in on their portal, and then the invoices can be issued. So this is what we have gathered the information from the ASPs. Um, Apart from that, we have also heard that Tally and Zoho will be the ones which would be providing their own ASP. So maybe those those clients who are using these ERPs, that is Tally and Zoho, so they do not have to integrate it, and they will have a direct patch available. However, it all depends when the new list is published by the authority. Then at that time only we will be clear that how much and who all are the new ASPs which are under the new list. So I think so that should be all.
Perfect, Murtaza. So regarding the business aspects, like, we'll definitely take this forward. So that's all. So thank you so much. And if there are any queries on e-invoicing or what we know till now, like, this is the venue. So it's open. We have some time. So any questions?
Audible? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you're audible.
Yes, so the question that I have is if a company in UAE is providing services or exporting to another country, should the customer should also have this e-invoicing system in their
Very
portal?
good question. Murtaza, would you like to take it?
Ashwin, can you please repeat?
So if the company in UAE is actually exporting goods to outside UAE,
Mm-hmm.
should the receiver
Mm-hmm.
should also have this kind of an e-invoicing system, or how can we how can we guide the client on this of this?
So if the receiver country is also mandated to have this e-invoicing system, so in that case, the seller ASP will automatically contact the buyer's ASP because there will be an ASP identification number also. So if the receiver country is mandated by e-invoicing system, which is applicable in Malaysia, Singapore, KSA, in that case, the seller ASP will get the buyer's ASP identification number, and by that, the invoices can be transmitted. And if the receiver country is not mandated by ESP, then a dummy number will be provided, whereby only the invoices will be sent from corner 2 to corner 5, and the invoice to the buyer has to be sent manually. The usual process that is in PDF or in any other format.
Fantastic. So Ashwin, for a long
Yes.
story short, it is applicable. Okay, you have to
Mm.
implement e-invoicing in UAE. That's what I told you. Any person has to do it. Only thing is whether you're doing a B2B or B2C. Don't confuse it with exports, zero rated sales or export sales or etc.
Mm.
Don't bring in VAT here. Just look at whether it's B2B or B2C. If it is B2B, definitely invoicing applies.
Correct. So it is also applicable whether the customer is registered under VAT or not. It applicables to all.
And also the VAT group and everything doesn't matter, right? So if two companies like Priorit and Alpargata, and if Priorit is selling to Alpargata, and if the gross sales is above 50 million, doesn't have any particular provision for that, right? It is above 50 million, they have to get e-invoicing done, right?
Yes, that's
See,
correct.
if,
So the
if
tax group, yeah, please.
sorry. 50 million is only for phase one or phase two identification. See,
Mm.
big thing is it's applicable for everyone. And you have to do it on an entity wide basis, right, Murtaza?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other doubts? So as I told you, this presentation and the everything is just on a trial basis. It's just a draft, so we have to fine tune, sitting with our expert Murtaza, and then afterwards we can kind of refine and present it to the clients. But if there are no further questions, let's wrap it up. Let's call it a day. Thank you so much for your patient audience. And if you want to take any queries offline, also you're welcome. Yeah. Thank you so much.